How long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart all the day? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? These are the words of Psalm 13. I turned to this psalm recently because I've been hearing this question a lot. How long? How long will the quarantine last? How long will this pandemic affect our lives? How long until I can get a haircut? All very real questions, and alas, no real answers. This is what we call waiting. And when we wait, we must be patient. While Israel was in exile in Babylon, I'm sure they turned to Psalm 13 quite often. Israel had been taken into Babylon in 597 BCE. They were separated from their homeland and their temple. They were not allowed to worship the way they had grown up worshiping. They were not allowed to fellowship with God in the way that they had so closely become accustomed to. They were called into a time of waiting. Eventually, Israel did return to the land, and they once again had their temple. Their style of worship had been restored. Well, that was until 70 of the Common Era, when Rome destroyed the temple. Now Israel is once again in a time of waiting, and this time of waiting has lasted them millennium. Waiting is not new for the people of God. When you go through the stories of the Bible, you begin to see how much time we actually have spent waiting, and you begin to see a pattern in our faith. Waiting requires trust, and without trust, there can be no faith. The book of Hebrews tells us that faith is the belief in things not seen, and trust is knowing those things are there, even when we cannot see them. Right now, we cannot see when our deliverance will be. We can't see when this will all be over. But we know that that time is there, and we simply have to trust. But waiting is hard. It's difficult, especially for a people like us who are used to having anything we want right now. We're actually quite spoiled from what previous generations have experienced. And our spoiled nature is now coming to the surface and is being shown to us in real time. I admit I have a hard time right now dealing with how spoiled I've been. I'm used to getting a craving and having it fulfilled immediately. I'm used to waking up in the morning, looking in the mirror and saying, I could really use a haircut. And within a couple of hours, I have a haircut. I was raised to be grateful for what I have and to not covet the things I do not have. So I'm quite embarrassed when I'm confronted by my own selfishness. Waiting requires us to think of something and someone larger than ourselves. And human beings are not used to that. We're the top of the food chain. We've conquered space. We do amazing things. We are awesome. Yet as we speak, something that is not human has caused all of that to stop. And we can't handle that. We can't handle not being in control. We can't handle being told no, that we have to wait for something. It is such an inconvenience to us. I'm grieved in my soul when I hear people say that it's okay to let others die so that we don't have to wait. I'm curious how many of those people would be willing to sacrifice their children or their grandchildren for that belief. It's sad to think there are so many people out there who are willing to let others perish so they don't have to wait any longer for a haircut. While waiting may be foreign to us as people living in this day, waiting is not new to us as humans. The psalmist expressed this frustration best with the words, "How long?" Many of you know that my favorite movie is Fiddler on the Roof. There is a scene at the end of the movie where they're being forced to leave their village. Sorry, that was a spoiler alert. At one point, one man turns to the rabbi and says, "Rabbi, we've waited all of our lives for the Messiah. Wouldn't now be a good time for him to come?" Believe me, I've asked that question a lot in these last few days. The rabbi in the film responds by saying, "We'll have to wait for him someplace else." Wait. We hate that word, but that's because we're spoiled. But when we understand that waiting is actually an act of faith, we may see it a bit differently. Waiting allows us to show our trust in God. Waiting gives us the ability to say, "All will be well, and I trust God." Then we begin to see the spiritual power of faith. So how does the psalmist occupy his time while he waits? The psalmist goes on to say, "But I have trusted in your loving kindness. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because God has done bountifully with me." Beautiful words in a beautiful book. The psalmist deals with his own selfishness by reminding himself how kind God has been to him in the past. The grace and love that God has shown over the years. The psalmist is reminded that salvation was given to us, and in that we remind ourselves to sing a new song of God's love, grace, mercy, and compassion. This is not the first time that God's people have experienced hard times, and this will not be the last. This will also not be the last time that we're called on to wait for something. But do you want to show your faith and trust in God? Then wait. Remember all that God has done for you and celebrate and sing to the Lord a new song, because we will survive. But we will survive this by the hand of God, not by our own selfish desires. And trusting in God means waiting. It means upholding the sanctity of the life of others. It means finally putting our Christian faith to practice in real and needful ways. In the book of Ephesians, Paul writes, "Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love." This is our time to learn to be humble and gentle. This is our time to think of others and preach the gospel in our actions. This is our time to bear with each other and show love in a real, tangible way. This is our time to be Christian.